Have you ever wondered what really happens in that in-between space between life and death? Those final moments when the heart stops beating, but something still lingers? Today, I'm going to take you on a journey that few dare to explore. A journey beyond the veil of physical death, where the soul awakens to a completely new and bewildering reality. Imagine for a second, you close your eyes for the last time in this world, and suddenly you open them again. But something is different, radically different. You are still you, but the world around you has transformed into a landscape that defies all logic. This is exactly what thousands of souls experience with every passing moment on our planet. What I'm going to share today isn't fiction. It's not empty theories or philosophical speculation. These are profound revelations based on the most detailed studies ever conducted on what happens to human consciousness after physical death. Revelations that can completely transform your perspective on life, death, and everything that exists between these two mysteries. If you've ever felt that chill down your spine when thinking about what comes next, if you've ever lost a loved one and wondered where that person is now, or if you're simply curious about the greatest mystery of human existence, then you need to stay with me until the end of this video. Because what you're about to discover could forever change the way you see your own journey in this life. If you enjoyed this content, leave a like now, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos about the mysteries of human existence. Your comments are also essential. They help me understand which topics spark your curiosity the most. When we talk about life after death, we need serious and reliable sources, right? The person guiding us on this extraordinary exploration is Edgar Cayce, known worldwide as the Sleeping Prophet and considered one of the greatest spiritual researchers of all time. For over 40 years, Cayce gave more than 14,000 documented psychic readings, many of them focused specifically on what happens to the soul after physical death. What makes Cayce unique is not just the impressive amount of information he channeled, but the consistency and depth of his revelations. Doctors, scientists, and researchers have studied his work for decades, and many of his descriptions of medicine and human anatomy were proven correct years later, when science finally had the knowledge to validate them. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Cayce's studies is his ability to describe, with precise and emotionally visceral detail, the experiences of souls in the period immediately following death. He not only mapped this unknown territory, but also revealed the patterns, phases, and challenges that each soul faces in this extraordinary transition. The information you are about to learn has been compiled from these meticulously documented readings, offering a unique window into a world that exists beyond the perception of our 5 physical senses. Let me introduce you to James, a 26-year-old soldier who died during a bombing in World War II. In the last seconds of his physical life, James felt a piercing pain in his chest, followed by absolute darkness. But then something extraordinary happened. He opened his eyes and saw himself standing, watching his own still body among the rubble. James's first reaction was total confusion. He tried to shout for help, but no sound came out. He tried to touch his own body, but his hands simply passed through the physical matter as if he were made of air. For hours, or was it days? Time seemed to work in a completely different way. James remained there, desperately trying to understand what was happening. Now meet Margaret, a 62-year-old teacher who passed away peacefully in her sleep. Unlike James, Margaret awoke in a landscape that was strangely familiar to her. It was as if she were walking through the halls of a school, but a school that existed only in her fondest memories. The sounds were muffled, the colors had a dreamlike quality, and she could feel the presence of people she couldn't see clearly. Margaret had an advantage over James. She had always believed in the continuity of life after death. This belief acted as an emotional anchor, allowing her to navigate this new reality with less resistance. Even so, she experienced moments of deep disorientation, especially when she tried to interact with the physical world she had left behind. And then we have Thomas, a 45-year-old businessman, a staunch materialist who always ridiculed any talk of spirituality. When Thomas awoke after a massive heart attack, his reaction was total denial. For a period that felt like an eternity, he insisted that he was just dreaming, that he would soon wake up in his comfortable bed. But here's what really happens, and this is where the journey becomes truly fascinating. According to Cayce's revelations, all souls, whether like James, Margaret, or Thomas, go through specific, predictable stages after physical death. It's as if there's a universal map for this transition, a cosmic script that every consciousness must follow. The first stage is what Cayce called the awakening in confusion. It's exactly what James experienced. The soul awakens to its new condition, but is still energetically connected to the physical world. This is why many newly departed souls are seen by sensitive people in hospitals, in their old homes, or in places that were significant to them in life. During this period, the soul retains all its memories, personality, and emotional patterns from physical life. It's like you're the same person, but operating on a completely different frequency. Imagine trying to tune a radio to a station you know very well, only to find that all the frequencies have changed overnight. The second stage is the dissolving of physical illusions. Here, the soul gradually begins to accept its new condition. Thomas, our skeptical businessman, spent weeks in this stage, desperately trying to return to his old life. He would try to use his phone, drive his car, even show up at business meetings. But slowly, as nothing responded to his attempts at physical interaction, he was forced to accept a reality that contradicted everything he believed in. The third stage is the call of the intermediary realm. This is where the true spiritual journey begins, and where our understanding of death is completely transformed. For you to truly understand what happens in this intermediary realm, imagine for a moment that you are in a house where you've lived for decades. You know every room, every piece of furniture, every familiar sound. But now, when you try to open a door, your hand passes through the doorknob as if it were made of smoke. When you sit in your favorite armchair, you simply sink through it. This is exactly the bewildering reality that Margaret faced. But here's the most extraordinary part. Cayce revealed that this phase is like a river meeting the ocean. Throughout our physical life, our consciousness flows in a narrow, defined channel, our five senses, our limited perception of time and space. But in death, this river of individual consciousness meets the infinite ocean of universal consciousness. Imagine you've always lived in a house with very small windows, and suddenly all the walls become transparent. At first, the amount of light and information would be completely overwhelming. You wouldn't know where to look, how to process so much new information. This is exactly what the soul experiences, a sudden expansion of perception that can be both liberating and terrifying. Sarah, a 38-year-old artist who passed after a long illness, described this experience through Cayce as trying to drink the ocean with a thimble. Her consciousness, accustomed to the limitations of the physical brain, suddenly had access to layers of reality she never even imagined existed. She could perceive the thoughts and emotions of people miles away. She could see events happening simultaneously in different parts of the world, and even more astonishingly, she could feel the energetic interconnection between all living beings. It's as if, for your entire life, you had worn extremely dark sunglasses and, suddenly, you took them off on a brilliantly sunny day. But not every soul easily accepts this expansion of consciousness. And here we come to one of the most touching and, at the same time, disturbing discoveries from Cayce's studies. Many souls choose to remain trapped between the two worlds, creating what he called a self-imposed veil of confusion. Remember Thomas, our skeptical businessman? After weeks of trying to deny his new reality, he finally accepted that he had died. But then something unexpected happened. He refused to move on. For months, Thomas remained energetically tied to his office, watching his partners divide his assets, criticizing every decision they made, feeling a helpless anger that grew with each passing day. Cayce revealed that Thomas was not alone. Thousands of souls make this choice. They prefer to cling to the known, even if it means existing in a state of chronic suffering. It's as if they'd rather live in a familiar nightmare than explore an unknown dream. But then something wonderful began to happen to Thomas. Slowly, he started to realize that his anger and resistance weren't hurting his former partners. They didn't even know he was there. The only person suffering from his refusal to move on was himself. And more importantly, he began to feel a loving, patient presence that seemed to always be there, waiting for him to be ready to accept help. This presence didn't force him, didn't judge him, didn't pressure him. It simply offered unconditional love and patiently waited for Thomas to make the decision to release his earthly attachments. It is here that we see one of the most comforting truths about death. No one is forced to do anything. No one is abandoned. And the love that awaits us on the other side is infinitely more patient and understanding than any love we experience on earth. Now, I'm going to tell you about an experience that virtually every soul has, and that can help you understand the depth of this journey. Imagine you've just woken up from the most vivid dream of your life. For a few seconds, you can't distinguish between what was dream and what is reality. You perfectly remember the people you met in the dream, the places you visited, the emotions you felt. But now, awake, you realize there's a fundamentally different quality to your waking consciousness. This is exactly what happens at the moment of death, but on an infinitely grander scale. Your entire physical life, all your memories, relationships, achievements, and sufferings, suddenly takes on a dreamlike quality. Not that they become less real or less important, but you realize that there was a much deeper layer of reality operating the whole time, a layer you were only partially aware of. Margaret, our dear teacher, described this as finally understanding the full plot of a movie you had only watched isolated scenes of. Throughout her physical life, she had felt there was something bigger, a deeper purpose, a spiritual connection she could never fully grasp. In death, all of this became crystal clear. Have you ever had that moment when a song plays and instantly transports you to a specific memory, with all the feelings and sensations of that moment? In the transition after death, this happens with your entire life. Every experience, every relationship, every moment of learning suddenly connects into a tapestry of meaning that is absolutely breathtaking. James, our brave soldier, experienced this when he finally stopped fighting against his new condition. Suddenly, he could see how every person he had helped during the war, every act of kindness, every moment of courage, had created ripples of positive impact that extended far beyond what he ever imagined. And here we arrive at the most transformative moment of this entire journey, what Cayce called the encounter with the inner light. But pay attention, this isn't what you might be thinking. It's not an external light that comes from outside to collect the soul. It's something infinitely more profound and personal. Thomas, our businessman who spent months resisting his new reality, finally reached a point of total emotional exhaustion. He had tried everything, denying, fighting, controlling, manipulating. Nothing worked. It was in this moment of complete surrender that something extraordinary happened. He began to perceive a light emanating from his own being, a light that had always been there, but that throughout his physical life was obscured by layers of fear, ego, and social conditioning. This inner light wasn't just brightness. It was pure knowledge, unconditional love, and a deep understanding of who he really was beyond all the roles he had played on earth. Thomas realized that for 45 years, he had completely identified with temporary characters: the successful businessman, the demanding husband, the absent father, the materialist skeptic. But now, face to face with his true essence, all those masks simply dissolved. The internal conflict that had tormented Thomas for months, between his need for control and the reality of his new condition, found resolution in an extraordinary synthesis. He realized that true control didn't come from manipulating external circumstances, but from aligning with the natural flow of spiritual consciousness. It was like finally stopping swimming against the current of a river and discovering that by surrendering to the flow, you are carried exactly where you need to be. Margaret experienced a different, but equally profound resolution. Throughout her life as an educator, she had struggled with the feeling of never doing enough, never truly impacting her students' lives. This internal conflict between her desire to serve and her perception of inadequacy had been a constant source of anxiety. In the intermediary realm, she gained access to the full perspective of her impact. She could see how a kind word she had offered to a shy student in 1987 had completely changed that child's life trajectory. how her patience with a student with learning difficulties had planted seeds of self-esteem that blossomed decades later. But more importantly, Margaret realized that the success of her work as an educator had never been her responsibility. Her only responsibility was to show up with love, patience, and dedication. The results were always a cosmic dance much larger than any individual effort could control. James faced the deepest conflict of all, the survivor's guilt and the war trauma he had carried in his final moments. In the intermediary realm, he came face to face not only with the enemies he had killed, but with the understanding that they were all aspects of the same universal consciousness, exploring different perspectives of the human experience. The moment of resolution came when James realized that the war, despite all its brutality, had served as a catalyst for spiritual lessons that could not have been learned otherwise. He had developed courage, compassion for his comrades, and a visceral understanding of the value of life. The enemy soldiers he had faced were also navigating their own journeys of spiritual learning. This understanding didn't minimize the horror of war or justify the violence, but it offered James a perspective that transformed his guilt into wisdom, his trauma into compassion, and his suffering into a healing tool for other souls who would go through similar experiences. Now, I know you might be wondering, what if I have a loved one who passed away recently? Are they going through these phases now? Or maybe, how can I be sure that my grandmother, who died 5 years ago, is okay? Let me share something that might bring a lot of comfort to your heart. According to Cayce's revelations, there is a permanent energetic connection between souls who loved each other on Earth. This connection completely transcends physical death. It's as if you are connected by invisible threads of light that stretch across all dimensions of reality. Sarah, our sensitive artist, discovered this in a touching way. After her transition, she realized she could feel the emotions of her husband who remained on Earth. When he cried out of longing, she felt a wave of love that prompted her to try to comfort him. Initially, this created frustration because she couldn't communicate in the traditional way. But then she learned something extraordinary. She could influence his emotional state through the pure intention of love. Her husband began to dream of her regularly. Not vague or confusing dreams, but vivid encounters where they talked, laughed, and she reassured him about her new condition. He would often wake up with a sense of inexplicable peace, as if he had really spent time with her. This was not imagination or psychological projection. This was Sarah learning to operate under the new laws of spiritual communication. She discovered that, free from the limitations of the physical body, she could transmit love, comfort, and guidance directly to the consciousness of loved ones still incarnated. For those of you who have lost someone special, a father, a mother, a child, a spouse, a dear friend, I want you to know that this person is not only okay, but is probably more present in your life now than when they had a physical body. Free from the limitations of time and space, they can be with you whenever you think of them with love. Margaret discovered she could simultaneously visit all of her former students scattered around the world. She had become a sort of collective guardian angel, offering inspiration and encouragement at crucial moments in their lives. A student who was about to drop out of medical school suddenly remembered a conversation he had with her 20 years earlier. A former student facing a difficult divorce woke up one morning with the exact words of encouragement Margaret used to use. Thomas, our transformed businessman, realized that his true legacy was not the businesses he had built, but the people he had touched, even without realizing it. He could see how an employee he had promoted years ago was now using that opportunity to educate his own children. How an anonymous donation he had made to a local school had changed the lives of dozens of children. And you, who are watching this video, are also part of this infinite tapestry of connections. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every moment you choose love over fear, creates ripples of impact that extend far beyond what you can imagine. So, what does all this mean for you, here now, still inhabiting a physical body on this extraordinary planet? How can this understanding of the soul's journey after death transform the way you live today? First, realize that you are not just this body, this personality, these roles you play. You are an eternal consciousness temporarily exploring the human experience. This doesn't make your current life less important. On the contrary, it makes every moment infinitely more precious, because you understand every experience here is contributing to the eternal growth of your soul. James found courage because he knew he needed to learn about bravery. Margaret dedicated her life to education because her soul was developing wisdom and compassion. Thomas built businesses because he was learning about manifestation and responsibility. Sarah created art because she was exploring beauty and inspiration. And you, what lessons is your soul exploring through the life you are living now? What qualities are you developing? What contributions are you offering to the collective tapestry of human experience? Second, understand that every person who crosses your path is a soul on a journey, just like you. That difficult person at work, that annoying neighbor, even those who seem to be your enemies, they are all consciousnesses exploring their own lessons. This doesn't mean you should accept harmful behavior, but it means you can respond with compassion instead of judgment. Third, live fully. Love deeply. Don't postpone happiness waiting for perfect circumstances. Cayce's revelations clearly show that we take with us not material possessions or social status, but the feelings we cultivate and the loving connections we build. Margaret didn't regret not making more money or achieving more professional recognition. She rejoiced in every moment of patience she offered, every smile she shared, every life she touched with kindness. And finally, stay open to the mystery. Death is not an end, but a transformation. It is not a punishment, but a continuation. It is not something to be feared, but an extraordinary adventure that awaits each of us. If this video brought clarity, comfort, or inspiration to you, show it by leaving your like. It helps more people find this transformative information. Share in the comments how these revelations have changed your perspective on life and death. And subscribe to the channel, because we will continue to explore the deepest mysteries of human existence. Remember, you are an eternal soul living a temporary human experience. Make it an extraordinary experience of love, growth, and contribution. On the other side of the veil, souls like James, Margaret, Thomas, and Sarah are cheering for you, sending love and wisdom to support your journey. Death is just a door. Life is eternal, and you, exactly as you are now, are infinitely more powerful and loved than you ever imagined.